Welcome to Weekend Ag Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Join us for an in-depth look at Iowa agriculture. Here's your host, Riley Smith.
The weather is supposed to be nice and beautiful for the time being, and that should allow for some mostly unstoppable planting progress across the state of Iowa. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to hear about a bunch of farmers wrapping up in the fields over the next several days. Welcome to this week's edition of Weekend Ag Matters. I'm Riley Smith. Russ Parker, Dustin Hoffmann, and Mark Magnuson will join us later on in the show. As for right now, let's take a quick look at the news headlines. The Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship has extended the deadline for nominations for the 2026 Iowa Farm Environmental Leader Award. The deadline to nominate a farmer or farm family is now Friday, May 22nd. The Iowa Farm Environmental Leader Award recognizes farm families who demonstrate outstanding voluntary efforts to improve and protect Iowa's soil and water resources while also serving as leaders in their community. Nominations may be submitted by farmers, landowners, conservation professionals, commodity groups, or members of the public. The nomination form can be found on the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship's website. In other news, the U.S. Department of Justice and 6 states have reached a settlement in their antitrust lawsuit against data company AgriStats. It's a move federal officials say could help lower meat prices for consumers. The lawsuit alleged AgriStats' detailed weekly pricing and sales reports enabled anti-competitive behavior within the chicken, pork, and turkey industries. Under the settlement, the company will now face limits on the data it can collect and must make information available to meat buyers such as grocery stores and restaurants, not just processors. The agreement, which still requires court approval, includes participation from California, Minnesota, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah. Officials say the changes are intended to increase transparency and competition through the meat supply chain. That's all the time we have for news headlines this week. Check out our stories at iowaagnet.com. We'll kick it over to Russ Parker with his faith-based food for thought on Weekend Ag Matters.
Do you enjoy listening to stories? I sure do. Listening about history and people's adventures and tales of life puts my brain into gear. A good example was during a recent stay in Williamsburg, Virginia, when we listened to a character actor portraying Marquis de Lafayette, the French nobleman who volunteered during the American Revolution. Complete with a French accent, he told us his story, including comments about his imprisonment in France during their own revolution. We all have our own stories, don't we? And they get called upon in a variety of settings. What's your story? Being asked that question by an investigator at a crime scene, for example, will generate a much different response than being asked the same question around a campfire. These days in the communications world, the idea of storytelling has taken on a whole new dynamic. So, for example, if one of our broadcasters asks someone, "What's your story?" the topic may not necessarily be about themselves, but rather about a project they're working on, why it's important, why it matters, and the message they want others to hear. And then we get into another definition of storytelling. Oh boy, social media and public platforms. In that space, get ready to be told a story. In some cases, one might experience a little white lie, all the way to blatant deception, and it reminds us to beware. We need to know, trust, and have assurance in who is telling us the story. The operative word here is assurance, a word defined by the idea of inspiring confidence and guaranteeing truth. You might recognize these words by Fanny Crosby, a storyteller who lived in the 1800s. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood. This is my story and this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I hope it's your story too. Food for thought, I hope. This is Russ Parker. Have a blessed day.
Thanks, Russ, and that's it for segment 1 of this week's episode. Coming up after this short break, Dustin Hoffmann sits down and has a one-on-one conversation with Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. This is Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Your local radio station brings you the local news you depend on. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network complements that with ag news, weather, and market updates tailored for Iowa's farmers. Together, we deliver the best of both worlds, local connection and industry expertise. It's all to keep you connected with the heartbeat of the heartland, the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, connecting rural Iowa with the news that matters to you.
Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's your host, Dustin Hoffmann.
Back on Weekend Ag Matters, and last week I had the chance to visit Washington, D.C. as part of the NAFB's Washington Watch event, and had the chance to visit with Iowa Senator Joni Ernst at her office in D.C., and we talked during the procedural vote of the House, which would eventually lead to the Farm Bill being passed the next day, and we talked about what's going on in the Senate and also different topics in agriculture, and here's what the Senator had to say.
Senator, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your busy schedule.
It's great to be with you, Dustin. Thank you.
All right, so big week here in Washington for ag broadcasters to be out here. I know the House is hopefully going to be voting on a farm bill and possibly a standalone E15 bill here. In fact, they're voting on the rules as we're talking right now. How excited are you to at least see that happening, at least on their side of the chamber?
I am very excited, and thanks to each one of our Iowa delegation members, they have engaged heavily on this issue. We need a farm bill. Our farmers want to see that. It's important that we deliver. So I'm thankful that the House is bringing this forward. It has been slow going in the Senate.
Now, I know the situation is they were trying to put an E15 amendment on it, but now they've had to make it into a standalone because of some budget office concerns. We were talking with a few of your colleagues on the Senate Ag Committee here earlier this morning, and they were talking about how it's going to be an interesting situation for you guys to be able to get it through as well, to get to that 60 vote threshold.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will be a tough one because there are a lot of different divisions now that are happening that when I was here, when I came to the Senate 12 years ago, that we didn't have. Everybody tried to work very well together. Unfortunately, there is a greater and greater divide between the rural and urban states. So this will be very, very difficult as we try and fix Proposition 12 from California, if we try and do E15 year round, if any of those measures makes it more and more difficult.
And from what you've been hearing from Senator Boozman, I mean, what's his timetable for trying to get this thing moving?
Well, we haven't heard a lot coming out of Chairman Boozman right now, but what we have heard is directly from the president that he wants a farm bill done now. So that does put a little pressure on both of our chairmen. We're glad to see the House acting on this. We'll take up what the House sends to us, and hopefully Chairman Boozman will push as hard as he can to get this done very soon.
And then moving on, Iowa is going to be a new home for a food safety center from USDA. So you want to tell us a little about what that's all about?
Absolutely. And I have pushed very hard, again, over the past decade or so to get the headquarters of different agencies out of Washington, D.C. I have the Drain the Swamp Act, and I've got the Swamp Act, and those move various departments out closer to the constituencies that they serve. Well, we're actually seeing the administration move on this even without having that legislation, especially when it comes to the USDA. And Secretary Rollins has announced that the Food Safety Office will be located in Urbandale, Iowa. This is a huge step for us, and we're really grateful. It just makes sense to have it in Iowa. We also see 4 other projects now that have been named coming out of USDA and will be located in Ames, Iowa. So again, she's really practicing what we all preach, and that's making sure that these departments that represent rural America are actually located in rural America.
And why is it so important to have that located in Urbandale, that food safety inspection office?
Well, again, food safety really centers out from Iowa, farm country. We have agriculture, whether it is animal husbandry and the meats we produce, or whether it is poultry and the eggs we produce in Iowa, all the way up to corn and soy that goes into our food systems. So it's really important that we have that food safety office there, again, because we are the heart of our food system right in Iowa. So it makes perfect sense to locate those officials in Urbandale.
And talking about the old USDA and some of the stuff you've been talking about, the office buildings and things like that, what is going on with the South Office building right now?
Yes, we are seeing the South USDA office building up for sale. So this is a great accomplishment, a wonderful win for us. This is an over 2 million square foot building that on good days is at the most 30% occupied. Most often it's only 15% occupied. And we have $1.6 billion of deferred maintenance on that building. It's time we cut the taxpayers loose and get rid of the building. And I'm very proud to say this is one that I've been after for a long time. And those workers in that building will be relocated to other areas. We'll be able to put that monstrosity up for sale, hopefully see it redeveloped and put back on the taxpayer rolls here in Washington, D.C.
And yesterday we also heard from Secretary Rollins and, of course, other members of the cabinet, as well as EPA Administrator Zeldin, talking about the fertilizer situation. Yes. I know Iowa farmers are watching that closely. Spring, we're okay, because everybody kind of booked ahead of everything. But now we're looking at fall and into next spring as well. I mean, what kind of things are you hearing in the Senate that we can maybe do to help the situation as well?
Yes, and transparency is key to this. At any time we see transparency within the system, that helps. Competitiveness, knowing where the glitches are, but then also we need to bring back a lot of this fertilizer manufacturing to the United States. And instead of importing, where we see the Straits of Hormuz now are creating an issue, tariffs issue. So there's just so many different ways that we can handle this. But number one is bring those jobs back to the United States, locate some of these production facilities in the Midwest where we know we're going to use those products. One issue I've been involved in is making sure that the critical components of our fertilizer are added back onto the critical minerals list. And so this has been a big push. We've been successful in that. But again, bring those jobs back to the United States of America, provide jobs and more certainty for our Iowa farmers.
And we have seen the tariffs be backed off on the Moroccan imports, which will help as well. But obviously there are things that we can't get in the United States that we have to import, like potash and things like that. In that situation, obviously USMCA is up for an agreement, and potash comes, a lot of it from Canada. I mean, what kind of things are we seeing on these fronts from what you're hearing?
Yeah, again, working with the departments, whether it's EPA, USDA, and making sure that those are included in our critical minerals list, because we do import. The war in Ukraine, because we do have a lot of those, the potash in particular, coming out of Ukraine and Russia, that has been stymied now for a couple of years. So again, just focusing on where can we find those critical elements, and can we friendshore? If it's something that we don't have here in the United States, is what we call friendshoring, working with allies and partners to get those products into the United States. And mentioning Canada, obviously USMCA is up for renegotiation. Any comment on what you'd like to see out of that negotiation? Yeah, certainly. Well, we'd like to see it stay put. Any modifications or tweaks, great. Along the way, I saw Jamison Greer, our U.S. trade rep, the other day, and just encouraged him to continue pushing on this. USMCA is very important to Iowa. Our top two trade partners, Mexico and Canada. All right. Any messages for our Iowa farmers? I know they're chomping at the bit to get out there and plant. Some of them have gotten crop in the ground. Any final messages for them? Yeah, absolutely. I just encourage all of our farmers and the traveling public to be aware. Spring planting season is always very busy, and we know that they're going to have large equipment out on our roadways. So please be cautious. Please be kind. Let's all be safe.
Thanks again to Iowa Senator Joni Ernst for joining us here on Weekend Ag Matters. That's going to do it for me. Mark Magnuson will be in to wrap up the show next.
Welcome to Weekend Ag Matters from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Join us for an in-depth look at Iowa agriculture. Here's your host, Riley Smith. Welcome back to Weekend Ag Matters. Here's Mark Magnuson.
You are listening to Weekend Ag Matters, and here today I bring you audio from USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins' recent press conference in Washington, D.C., talking about the high price of fertilizer and steps being made by the Trump administration to bring those prices, hopefully, to the downside.
I hope y'all have had a great day. I know our ag media has been in town, and it was fun to be with y'all this morning, and thanks for coming back. And for those that are not the ag media, welcome again to USDA. We have a really great couple of minutes where we're going to talk about fertilizer. And so I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. You'll get to hear from members of our cabinet and obviously some key leaders from the Hill as well. So again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. For years, American farmers and ranchers have faced high fertilizer prices, not least because of consolidation has led to fewer options and higher prices in the marketplace. According to USDA data, in the 1980s, we had nearly 50 U.S. nitrogen fertilizer producers. Today, 4 companies control 75% of the domestic nitrogen fertilizer market, and just 2 firms control almost all of the U.S. potash fertilizer market. American farmers need more options and more predictability going forward to keep family farms producing. Over the past several months, we have been poring over data that illustrates farmers' varying demands at different points during the spring planting season. And while the data continue to evolve, it's clear our farmers are feeling the pinch and the work must continue at rapid speed. Trump speed is what we like to call it in our administration. But I think it's important at the outset to note that this problem didn't just crop up. The Biden administration in particular did little as the price of fertilizer shot up 40% during those 4 years and hitting and one point in time even reaching 99% higher prices. This was, of course, on top of the other challenges that had snowballed during farm country during those years, including historically low prices in the last administration, where an ag surplus was turned into a $50 billion agricultural trade deficit between the years of 2020 and 2025. But we're not passing the buck or leaving problems for others to deal with. President Trump has asked us and tasked us to take on this difficult fight. There's no question ensuring our farmers can obtain the fertilizer they need at a price they can afford is a long-term problem, but one that also demands immediate solutions both for our farmers and our consumers. That's why we are tackling this challenge head-on right now as we're moving into planting season, including by collaborating in an unprecedented level across our cabinet and with our partners on the Hill. So today I asked all my colleagues at very last minute to join us so that we can together update on this problem that is facing our country and what we are going to do first in the short term and second in the long term. Long term is really where I want to focus most of today, but we also, obviously with prices where they are, want to talk about the short term. First, of course, you all know in March, President Trump suspended the Jones Act for 60 days to boost shipping flexibility and help vital resources like fertilizer flow more freely to U.S. ports. Just last week, President Trump further extended this waiver by 90 days. According to the U.S. Maritime Administration, we saw this tool used in early April for several anhydrous ammonia deliveries. So we've seen it actually in action, and we expect more fertilizer to come in under this waiver in the coming days and weeks. Number 2, we removed restrictions on fertilizer imports from Venezuela. In March, the Treasury Department waived restrictions on U.S. entities purchasing petrochemical products from Venezuela, including fertilizer, to increase domestic supply. We are working daily alongside both Treasury and State, Secretary Rubio and Secretary Besant, with companies looking to send us their urea and sulfur. One pending shipment, we believe, perhaps on its way based on current data, will fill about 57% of our April to June urea gap. Number 3, and fortunately, Administrator Zeldin, so grateful to him. But number 3 in the short term, rewriting diesel exhaust fluid rules. In March, President Trump directed our great EPA to rewrite the rules on the diesel exhaust fluid. I'll let Administrator Zeldin talk a bit about this one, but we're hearing, for example, the Dakota Gasification Company has deliberately prioritized higher urea production while reducing DEF output in wake of this recent news. Again, real world answers to some of the policy solutions that we're putting out. Number 4, critical minerals. This work dates back to spring of 2025 as well, when President Trump reinstated potash as a mineral critical to national and economic security. This underscores our belief that the availability of affordable fertilizers is essential for U.S. food and farm security, which means, of course, national security. And our great Secretary Burgum will speak a little to that. Next, antitrust enforcement. In September of last year, just a few months ago, we signed at USDA alongside the Department of Justice an MOU to strengthen competition and harness agricultural input costs, including fertilizers. While Attorney General Blanche is not here today, we continue to have that discussion, and the DOJ is taking that very, very seriously. And the private sector is stepping up. Just last week, I had several of the CEOs from major fertilizer companies in the office here at USDA. Several of our cabinet members were there as well. A great American company, CF Industries, listened to farmers and to the administration and has delayed their scheduled maintenance on their ammonia plant in Donaldsonville, Louisiana, supplying an additional 100,000 tons of granular urea to U.S. customers that otherwise would not have been available this planting season. Another example, Pivot Bio is also allowing customers to lock in their prices through the 2028 season. Our administration continues to push others in the private sector to make similar commitments to our farmers. Strengthening the domestic supply is crucial, but we're not stopping there. The Department of Treasury recently announced they're taking action at the G20 this April in his capacity as chair of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. Secretary Bessent issued a chair's statement calling on countries to refrain from imposing export prohibitions or restrictions on fertilizer. And we look forward to our friends and allies stepping up to the plate. Here at USDA, we're currently harnessing ag precision technology alternatives to fertilizer on a scale never before seen in the history of our country. Last month, USDA, Senator Hoeven, launched the National Proving Grounds Network for Ag Tech to test and validate emerging and existing precision agricultural technology that reduces reliance on fertilizer imports. These new technologies hold the potential to radically improve the situation, and the best minds in America are already working hard to make that happen. Again, these are just some of the short-term actions that we have taken in the last 60 days to shore up fertilizer prices as much as is humanly possible with the current conflict. But I also want to note that we are looking, and perhaps even more importantly, at the long term and what we have to do to ensure this situation does not happen again. At our rural development mission in that area, we continue to build out production through a $900 million fertilizer production expansion program. The last administration saw only a handful of the 120 projects then awarded completed, and we are now working around the clock with a lot of these, dozens of these projects, to bring them to fruition. For example, natural fertilizer products in Ames, Iowa is near the finish line and will be online and operational this summer, increasing their production by 36,000 tons annually. I also want to call attention to two big funding opportunities that the administration is driving. Number one, and again, so grateful Secretary Lutnick is here to talk more about that, but the Commerce Department Investment Accelerator projects, fertilizer projects, investing over $1 billion in the United States infrastructure may be eligible for assistance from the Department of Commerce's Investment Accelerator, which is currently overseeing a historical, stunning number, $750 billion available, thanks to our trade deal-related funding. Again, Secretary Lutnick will share more about that. Number two, Secretary Chris Wright, he's on travel today, he's not here, but asked to pass along the Energy Department's Energy Dominance Financing Program. Our administration is committed to supporting future federal legislative efforts, some happening right now, that alleviate high fertilizer costs as well. We continue to be laser focused and will not rest until this problem is solved. through all of the above, and again, I'm going to turn over to Kevin Hassett next, we believe that in short order, in the next year to 2 years, we could expand, back of napkin, our domestic nitrogen production by more than 30% just in a short period of time, our domestic phosphate production by over 200%, and our domestic potash production by over 100% with just the projects and the framework that I have just outlined. This is real world change for our farmers and ranchers and for our American rural communities and ultimately for national security for our country. Again, I want to thank everyone here. I want to reiterate and underscore that this president remains resolute and convicted to do everything we possibly can to ensure that we are doing what we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again with our fertilizer prices.
That was USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins on the situation on fertilizer here in the United States and the steps that the Trump administration is taking to hopefully bring those prices down. You've been listening to Weekend Ag Matters. Thank you to Russ. Thank you to Dustin and Riley Smith. I'm Mark Magnuson. To listen to this episode and all of our past episodes of Weekend Ag Matters, head to the podcast tab at iowaagnet.com. You've been listening to Weekend Ag Matters on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.